So, good evening, all together. Seeing our tonight's audience, this actually reminds me of a German saying, klein aber fein. So small in size, but of very high quality. And yeah, before we give the floor over to our tonight's speaker, I would like to express some introductory words about our Exercising Modernity program, and of course some biographical details. So Exercising Modernity is like split into certain subdivisions, and among those the most important one is Exercising Modernity Academy. Now Academy, that's of course like a notion which stems back from Plato's Academy, which might seem a little bit far-stretched, but actually there is some inspiration. Like the original idea of academy was that there is actually no clear division between pupils and teachers, and that no doctrines are being taught, but ideas are being discussed. That's why sometimes the academy is being referred to as skeptical in terms of philosophy. It assumes that there is truth, but it's very difficult to get there, and we ought to do it in a collective effort. And I think our Exercising Modernity Academy draws inspiration from this. Its topical focus is the 20th century and the history of modernity in Central and Eastern Europe, although not only there, but basically in places which are often being forgotten in public perceptions of history and narratives. And since we speak so much about unity and also European unity, it's interesting that such an interesting and peculiar phase of history is rarely being talked about. And a second subdivision then, stemming from Exercising Modernity Academy, are our Exercising Modernity scholarships. And Ursula is an Exercising Modernity scholarship holder. And the idea is that, again, as the Exercising Modernity Academy is a place where we basically swim in a free flow of creativity and spontaneously expressed ideas, those scholarships are basically meant to create an environment where ideas can take shape, and where our scholarships are being supervised by specialists, experts, and create conditions which allow them to flourish and conduct cutting-edge, in-depth research. And a few words, as I said at the beginning, about Ula Prokop. She's an architect, urbanist, researcher, lives and works in Warsaw, a graduate of architecture at the Warsaw University of Technology, but also studied extensively in Belgium at KU Leuven, if I pronounced correctly, I hope so. She gained professional experience at the BBJK Architects by working on housing projects and urban layouts. Currently, she's a PhD student at Warsaw University of Technology and a co-author of Adrikalim, Architects, a lexicon of architects of Jewish origin who were born inside the territory of Poland and subsequently emigrated to Israel, where they created buildings now considered icons of architecture. And that is going to be tonight's topic, but I think now is the time to pass on the mic to you. And Ula Prokop, thanks so much for coming here tonight and offering some very interesting insights about an unknown, but undeservedly so, topic.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So, hello, my name is Ula Prokop, and for the last half of a year, I've been carrying out a project called The Creators of the Future. The Creators of the Future is a research about Samuel Beckles and other architects and planners who at the beginning of the 20th century emigrated from Eastern Europe to Palestine to become key figures in planning of the newborn Israel. And today I would like to talk about the project and the journey that I took in May this year to follow the architects and search for their traces. So first of all, I would like to briefly outline a context of the story and try to answer a question: who actually were the architects am I going to talk about? So at the beginning of the 20th century, with particular force in the 30s, after the intensification of anti-Semitism, architects were migrating, or people were migrating from the territory of today's Central and Eastern Europe to Palestine to search for new opportunities and better life. And among those people, there were a lot of qualified specialists who were looking for a chance to take part in rapidly developing building industry in Palestine. So at the beginning of my research, I focused on those architects and planners who were born in, let's say, Polish cultural circle. So I mean mostly people born inside the territory of Poland from before the Second World War. And actually it was also the biggest group of architects working in Palestine before 1948. And I think that in this group we can distinguish three main subgroups, differing in education and also the moment of their lives when they migrated to Palestine. So the first group will be people who got their higher education in Poland and emigrated as adult specialists. So at the time in Poland there were two universities that ran architecture faculties, and it was in Warsaw and in Lviv. And the second group are people who left Poland as very young people and left to other European countries, especially to Germany and Austria, to study architecture there. So they were mostly studying in Bauhaus and in Vienna. And then they emigrated to Palestine, usually after some short practice in German architectural offices. And the last group are people who emigrated as children with their parents, and they usually study architecture in Haifa at Technion University, and this faculty was founded around 1924, so there is a very big group of architects working in Israel who graduated Technion Haifa. And these people had really, really different backgrounds. Some of them were born in big cities, some of them in little shtetls or villages. Some of them were involved in Zionist youth movements. The others, for the others, designing in Palestine was supposed to be only a temporary work, a commercial assignment. As I said before, at the beginning of my research, I limited the group to the people who were born in Poland, but after 6 years of living with those biographies, I realized that categorizing them in this way is maybe not the best decision, and that I should see them as a bigger group in a wider context, and it's not actually something important if they were from Poland, Germany, or Russia, or Romania. They shouldn't be considered as a group, but rather as many individuals set in a common historical and political and social context. And what they had in common was this journey that they took from Europe to Palestine, and this pursuit for modernity, and also growing up in an atmosphere of changes. So after their arrival to Palestine, they got perfect conditions for realizing and for creation innovative, sometimes even experimental designs. And the activity of Jewish architects in Palestine at the beginning of 20th century had two different phases. Like we can see two different ways of working. And so the first thing, the architects participated in colonization of rural areas, trying to find some design solutions for new housing typologies for the Zionist movements. And the colonization starts even earlier, at the end of 19th century, but there was always this very strong bond between Zionism and agrarism. So this colonization was often motivated by cultivation of the wasteland or the desert, and this agrarian rural settlements were a very important element of building this new society in Palestine. And the land was cultivated by different communes. The best known of them are Moshavim and Kibbutzim. So some agricultural collectives that of people who shared work, but not only work, but also space and other spheres of their lives. And what is more, we shouldn't forget about the paramilitary character of those settlements and the ideological aspects of building them. Sorry. Okay. And this architecture was a very important element of shaping the society and of creating some bonds between people who lived there. So on the one hand, we have this rural settlements, but on the other hand, there are coastal cities as Tel Aviv or Haifa, and those cities are developing very fast at the beginning of 20th century. And if we think about Tel Aviv, we think about this spatial structure that is really dominated by very homogeneous residential architecture. And the city fabric is filled with those avant-garde international style buildings, usually really enjoyable ones. And this city was mostly financed by private investors. And using this international style in architecture was great chance for architects and also for the investors to cut off ties to the past, to cut off ties to the European tradition of architecture, but also to fulfill the dreams about this hygienic, modern, and prosperous city. So they are like architects at that time and are concentrating on these two areas, the modern cities, coastal cities, and the rural settlements. And this situation lasts till 1948, when the state of Israel proclaimed. And here the new story begins. So after the transformation and after war of independence, Israel faces some challenges to create like the whole new structures, state structures, and also the whole infrastructure of the new country. So a lot of work have to be done, but also there are really new perspectives. One of them is that almost 95% of the territory of the newborn Israel was confiscated from the Palestinian people, and it was nationalized. So now, like at the moment, a lot of building plots were unlocked and they could be built up with the new settlements. And what did the architects do in this situation? Some of them continues to work in architectural offices in Tel Aviv or Haifa, but the others decided to work for the newly established government. And in this picture, the man in this picture is Ariel Sharon, who is from the second group, and he became chief of the planning department within the prime minister office. And Ariel Sharon was born in Yarosław, Poland. It's a little historic town in southern Poland. Then he emigrated to Palestine and worked in Kibbutz, but he went back Europe to study in Bauhaus, and he finished the whole course in Bauhaus. And after coming back to Israel, he got this possibility to become chief of the planning department. And was he ready for such an undertaking? Probably not. He was just after his studies, but he managed to create a group of architects, of planners, who outlined the plan for the whole country. And here you can see one of the schemes promoting this plan, Sharon Plan, and this board was exhibited in Tel Aviv in 1950 to promote this this great undertaking, this like the move that country was going to make. And the most important thing was to provide housing for the upcoming waves of immigrants, because at the time there were people coming primarily from Eastern Africa and Asia, but also from the post-war Europe, and the waves of those immigrants were flooding the coastline. And in 1948, the like almost two-thirds of the population lived in the coastline, this coastline stripe, and almost no, like two-thirds lived in the biggest cities, so in Haifa, Tel Aviv, and Jerusalem, and almost 82% of people lived in this coastal stripe. So there was very big need for housing in this place, but also a lack of working places. So the idea was to disperse those people, to create more than 20 new towns that had quite agricultural character, and they were placed in different regions of the country. So on the scheme you can see that on the left is this how does it work if there is this free capitalism, and on the right that they actually should use the central planning that is really organized and give the big possibility for the development of the country. But the Sharon plan was not only about dispersal of the citizens, it had much more demands. And except this dispersion, there was building necessary infrastructure for the whole country. There was water supply, and what I think is quite interesting, national parks. And national parks were created not only to preserve the nature, but also to outline some ancient historical sites that were supposed to constitute Jewish presence on this land. So they were trying to find some historical sites that were in their thoughts like Jewish. And what is more, a lot of, as I said, like a lot of Palestinian villages were confiscated by the state, so there were lands already prepared for agriculture and establishment of the new settlements. So as you can see, the context of the work of architects in the beginning of 20th century in Israel was quite complex in both political, social, ideological way. And what was interesting that they actually participated in building the country for immigrants by immigrants, but with totally different backgrounds. And after some times of voluntary colonization, they had to face a rapid development of the newborn country. And the second part of my presentation will be a story about Samuel Beckles. And because of such a complex topic and not in the short time, it was not possible to trace all the biographies of those people. And I had to, on the certain point of my research, I had to choose the thing that interests me the most and the story of a person who would like to follow. So I decided to choose Samuel Beckles as my guide in this history of architecture of that time. And why Samuel Beckles? I think that he was a very honest and also quite individual architect. And what is more, I was looking for a person who was not only designing, but was also truly devoted to his work and ideologically engaged in this process. And Samuel Beckles not only designed kibbutzim, but he was also a member of a kibbutz, and he was in a Mapam party. So actually he was really, really into this whole process, and he was a truly believer of the development of the newborn Israel. And Samuel Beckles was one of the prominent kibbutz planners, but he was not only a theorist, but also a practitioner. And he designed more than 60 kibbutzim, master plans all over Israel, but also dozens of buildings of cultural institutions, dining halls and other cultural buildings inside kibbutzim. And comparing to other architects, at that time, yeah, he was especially devoted to creation of this new living environment for the new citizens of the country. But to start from the beginning, this is his secondary school living certificate. Samuel Bickels lived in Lviv. He was born in Lviv in 1909, and he was growing up in an assimilated Jewish family. In this house, they were speaking Polish, and he was the son of Mordechai and Hannah Bikeles, and his father was a doctor, a specialist in internal medicine and pediatrics, and his mother was a teacher in a primary school for Jewish girls. Also, he grew up in the shadow of his older brother Jakub, because Jakub also got to the medical studies, same as father, and became really famous psychiatrist in Lviv. And Samuel also tried to get to medical studies, but he didn't manage to do it, so he became an architect. And he studied in Lviv University of Technology, Politechnika Lwowska, and he got there very traditional architectural education. In his student record book, we can read that he was studying classical composition, and I think it's really well visible in his later project, like later works. But in the program of the urban studies at Politechnika Lwowska, this program was prepared by Professor Ignacy Drexler, and he was an urban planner and author of the Lviv regulation plan. He was writing some study books, some scientific dissertations, and he was a big fan of garden cities. One of his books was about the designing garden cities, and I think this is also really visible in Bickels' work. And it might have a big influence on him. This is one of the students' project from Lviv University of Technology by Bickels, and when I've seen this picture for the first time, I was really, really surprised, because this design is far more avant-garde and modern than what he designed later in Palestine. And what is more interesting, that modernism in Lviv, like, it begins in the 30s, and it's also like another style. It's not so avant-garde, it's more an elegant residential modernism. So actually he couldn't even see something like that at the time in Lviv. He had to know some books or magazines from another places in Europe. And after graduating, Bickels went on study trip to Paris. He went back to Lviv, married Clara Project, who was his friend from the studies. She was a nuclear physician, and they together legally emigrated to Palestine in 1933. And after the emigration, they lived in Tel Aviv and Haifa for several years, to finally settle in Yisrael Woli and became member of Kibbutz. And it was a time when Bickels got a job in technical bureau of the United Kibbutz in En Harod. So he went to En Harod to work, but he stayed there, or opposite, because first he lived in Tel Yosef and then in Bet Hashita. After the split of kibbutzim, he moved by the ideological reasons to Bet Hashita, and he lived there till his death. But Yisrael Woli was not only a place of living, but also a place where the majority of buildings, his designs, have been built. And as you can see, plenty of his realizations, the cultural centers, sport halls, dining halls, are located like along this way in several kibbutzim. Like in every kibbutz, there it's at least one of his designs. And what was characteristic for Bickels was that this, like on the background of other architects, his designs were very classically composed, and I would say that it was a very classical modernism. He usually uses these big walls. He doesn't didn't avoid symmetry. He uses a lot of vertical accents, and he usually uses only one material on the whole building, on the whole facade. He doesn't differentiate materials or textures. He usually uses only light plain plaster and doesn't show any concrete elements. So I think it's quite unusual at the time. And but architecture was not the only field of his work. He was primarily an urban planner. And maybe urban planner is not the best definition because he designed rural settlements, so he was a rural planner. And he started to design kibbutzim in the 30s. Then during 40s he focused on theoretical work, and after the proclamation on the state he keeps working on kibbutz layout, but usually extensions of the existing structures. And here you can see a master plan of a typical kibbutz based on Bickel's studies. And according to Bickels, kibbutz was an expression of a classless regime. So it was concentrating or the cultural, educational, emotional, and economical influence of a progressive society. And kibbutzim, as many modernistic settlements, were characterized by zoning, and maybe I can show it. So this settlement has like two main zones. It's a dwelling zone over here and the industrial farm zone here, and they are divided by the green buffer zone in the middle. And here you can enter the place from the main road by those two roads here. And also it has some sub-zones. Like for example, here is the school zone, here is the cultural space. And this more technical zone is divided into farming and more industrial part. And what is really interesting in this case that actually there was no car traffic inside the kibbutzim. So cars can, of course, enter with the main road, they can enter the industrial zone, and also the supply to the cultural houses and dining halls were provided. But inside the dwelling zone, there were no cars, so the size of the whole settlement was based on the traffic, on the pedestrian traffic, and it was a 10 minutes walk from the central part of the kibbutz till the the border of the dwelling zone, and it was about 300 meters. And also this constitutes the size, I mean the number of people, of inhabitants who could live there, and it was, according to Bickels, about 250 families, so 1,200 inhabitants in such a settlement. And there is one more very important aspect of the kibbutz space, it's the greenery. And this is absolutely crucial for Bickels. He's very involved in process of creating so-called gardenscape. And the gardenscape was not only a decorative function of the greenery, but it also became a main object of the design. So he created some inclusive gardens that was supposed to be not only for to be as a background for the buildings, but inclusive garden in which people can live, work, rest, meet friends, just a space for living. And the gardenscape for Bickels is not only to create space, but also to create identity. And the function of every building in the kibbutz is not only utilitarian, but also emotional. And same with landscaping. So the landscape in kibbutz should be organic and homogeneous with the whole design. And the garden expresses the character of the society that built it. Here I have some sketches by Bickels, and this is a radial scheme diagram of a kibbutz. And you can see how the greenery of the kibbutz merges the greenery of the regional landscape. And also landscape is something very important for him. He liked to use different levels of and shapes to outline the design of the settlement. Bickles was not only, like his works were not only about composition and gardening, but also he had he paid attention to this practical phase of the project, and he was really fluent in designing the industrial buildings. In his publication, he includes very specific data about designing these industrial zones, and as an architect I know that this is probably not the most fun to design, but he was really good prepared to this work. And he considered all the economical aspects of building those settlements. And one of the most important parts of his work was designing the central areas of kibbutzim. And in this picture, like this bottom one, on the bottom one you can see the central area of Bet Hashita kibbutz. So this is the kibbutz in which he lived. And you can see how all the elements are composed. So here is the dining hall. Next to the dining hall on a hill, like all the elements are placed on the hill, and dwelling is like under this composition. So there is a dining hall, a library, members club, and reading room. Here is the some sport facilities, sport hall, and the school area that is like entering all the composition. And this building of library and members club initially looked like that. It was a very nice, beautiful horizontal composition situated on this hill, playing with the water, and very well composed with this gardenscape, which were so important for Bickles. This subtle architecture even is emphasizing the value of the gardenscape. But this is not one of the most recognizable designs by Bickles. This is the one that it's like the best known. This is Mishkan Museum in En-Harod Kibbutz, and the true value of this building is hidden inside of it, because this building is a great testing ground for the ways of using natural lighting to illuminate the exhibitions. And the interiors look like that. This is the way in which Bickles works with light. He using different shapes of those canopies, those vaults, to disperse the light. And by those different shapes, he creates really like impressive ways of illuminating those art pieces that are exhibited there. And the third part of the presentation would be about the journey I took in May this year to follow Bickles and find some information about him, to see the architecture of Israel of this time. And when I set off to Israel, I couldn't imagine that I will meet so many amazing people and to see such a great architecture there. And thanks to Exercising Modernity Scholarship, I had the courage to quit my job in architectural office in Warsaw and start and focus on my research work. And I've started the journey to Israel in Tel Aviv, as many of the architects of the time who were migrating to Palestine. And besides admiring those international style architecture of the 30s, I had a chance to meet Professor Tzvi Efrat, who helped me a lot to set priorities of my journey and my research, and he showed me some different ways of looking at this architecture and thinking about the architecture of Palestine and Israel. And it was also a moment when I've heard for the first time about Avital Efrat, and she will be a very important figure in my journey, but I will be back soon with this topic. So after a few days in Tel Aviv, I went to Haifa when I spent some time in architectural library of Technion. I had some meetings in Technion. I managed to collect books and materials that were very useful for my research. And I also visited the Center of the Study of Built Heritage by Avi and Sarah Arnson. This is a very special place on the Faculty of Architecture in Technion, and this center houses various resources, including files of about 200 architects who were active in Israel in the 20th century. And they have collection of students' project, they have some collections of maps, of aerial photographs, and of course, a lot of designs that were very interesting for my research. And later, I went to Lohame Hagetaot to meet the first building of Samuel Bickels, to see my first building of Samuel Bickels. And this was this building, this monumental museum. This is the first museum of Holocaust in the world. And this is also a building that was founded by Holocaust survivors. And mostly people who survived Warsaw Ghetto. So the name of this is the Ghetto Fighters House, Kibbutz, and Museum. And this spectacular building was inspired by the European monumental architecture of the 30s. And in this photo you can see the opening of the museum in 1958. And this is how it looks now. What's interesting here is the shape of the walls. It's very characteristic for Bickels' works. He used this motif in many of his buildings. And the shape of the wall and the light together create very specific colonnade-like look. But it's actually a very thick wall. That is also a construction for the building. From Lohame Hagetaot, we moved to Galilee, and this was very interesting way along all the oldest kibbutzim near the Galilee Lake, and finally got to the Yezreel Valley. And the Yezreel Valley is an agricultural region filled with fields, with fish ponds, and there is this road that it's the spine of the whole neighborhood, and on both sides there are kibbutzim, and as I said before, in each of the kibbutzim there is at least one work of Samuel Bickels. So I started with Neve Eitan, here. And Neve Eitan was actually my first disappointment because the building was totally abandoned. It was very interesting building with this nicely shaped roof, but it doesn't work. It's closed since a couple of years. Nobody takes care of this building. And the next place was the Nahum with the dining hall. And this building was also closed, but it's being renovated. So I don't know what was the effect of this renovation, but I hope they tried to do it like according to the original character of the building. And the third place was this regional transportation cooperative with this barrel-shaped roofing. And this place, I know that there is a debate now whether to demolish this or to try to adapt these buildings. And I think that the idea was to adapt it for a tourism center. So maybe it would be a nice idea to bring life back to this structure. So the first impression was quite upsetting. But actually fortunately, there are some buildings that are not in such a bad conditions. And I think that the best preserved building is Mishkan Museum. And to visit this place, it was my dream since 2015 when I first heard about this building. And to see all those very special ways of using light in exhibitional building. This building makes really great impression, And the other thing was that I was very warmly welcomed by the staff of the museum. They gave me opportunity to see all the places, even though a lot of rooms were closed due to the change of exhibition and they were closed to audience. But actually for architect, it was even nice to see the building without the exhibition, to admire just pure architecture of this place. They also gave me a possibility to study plans and other documents in the museum's library. And to see this space, this tiny space in the museum, was arranged as Bickel's office. He never worked there, but there is an original equipment from his workshop and part of the archive. And at every step of the way, I was very lucky to meet amazing people, helpful people. And when I was sightseeing this kibbutz, Tel Yosef, and looking for this building, Trumpeldor House, it was like a cultural center of the kibbutz. An old lady approached me. She was a teacher of the kindergarten. And she asked me if I would like to see the inside of the building. And a few years ago, it was closed, but Tzipi Ben-Zion and her friends decided to give this building back to life and back to the community. And they went to the building that was a house of a group of pigeons before and cleaned it. They restored it a little bit. And they made a museum inside. I would say that this is an ethnographic museum because they have there a lot of everyday items of the kibbutz, like from the whole history of the kibbutz, furniture, clothes, electronics, kitchen items, like everything they put inside. And it was really, really great to see this exhibition. And we left the Yezreel Valley and went to see the last building, I mean, the last on my way, but not the last in the career of Samuel Bickles, but one of the latest buildings by him. It was in Kibbutz Bet Oren. I think this is one of the most expressive and more, let's say, brutal works of Bickles. This is an extension of a guest house, and inside this extension there is a multifunctional meeting space for the guests. And as you can see here, the concrete is visible, the structure of the building is visible. It's not so usual for him. But this was designed in 1965, so it's a later work. And my last stop before going back to Tel Aviv was Zichron Yaakov. It turned out to be the most important part of the journey, even though there is no Bickles building. This place, I went there because of Avital Efrat. Every time when I was mentioning to someone that I'm looking for some works of Bickles, that I'm making a research about Bickles, they asked me if I know Avital Efrat. So I knew that she must be important, but I didn't know how important. And so finally I visited her at her office. She's a principal of a local museum in Zichron Yaakov. And Avital, she's a researcher born in Bet Hashita. So she spent her youth in the kibbutz in which Bickles lived. She knew him, I mean, she remembered him from her youth. And during her studies, she decided to write a dissertation about his work and life. And it was already after his death, so she went to his family to ask them for some help. And what she discovered was that actually the whole archive is still there. Like they have his workshop, and the workshop was in the perfect condition. She found there not only furniture, but some models, drawings, sketches, some handwriting of Bickles, but also this library. And these books are in Polish, Russian, English, German, French, and Italian, and Hebrew, of course. And he probably could read in all the languages. He knew, of course, like for sure he knew Polish, Italian, Hebrew, and a little bit English. So there are not only books, but also some magazines, architectural magazines, and those elements for model making. And she was the person who got this idea to recreate his office in Mishkan Art Museum. So she took the archive, she cataloged it, all the projects, and digitalized them and took them to like the part of it to Enharod Museum. And Avital, she turned out to be a very kind and very generous person, because she spent her time to tell me a lot about Beacles, but she also gave me the whole archive. Like she just gave me all the files with almost 30 years of her research work. And so many of the pictures you could see today, they are the pictures from the Avital, or rather from the family archive, but provided by Avital. So all the also all the documents from Poland from before the migration, they were also in this family archive, because he took all these documents with him when he went to Palestine. So the archive was amazing source of knowledge, because I could see not only the result of design, like the ready building, but also the whole process of designing it, and also some ideas that were never realized, the ideas of Beacles architecture. And after this amazing event and this very emotional meeting, my trip finished back in Tel Aviv. And now at the end, maybe I will try to tell you something about the obstacles during this trip, because there is also always the question, what was the hardest during your research? And actually the hardest was to find those buildings, because one thing that they are not marked or on maps. It's not so easy to find, for example, some dining halls. Of course, they are just in the middle of the kibbutz, and now I know this, and we managed to find them. But when I was preparing to the journey, it was not so easy to navigate and to find a way to these places. Also because the satellite maps of Israel are very, very bad quality. It's totally not to what we got used to in Europe, probably because of the security of the country. It's not possible to see anything. And but the other thing was that those buildings were really rebuilt or extended, and they were very hardly recognizable. And I would like to show some examples. This building you already know, Library and Members Club, and this is how it looked at the beginning of the 60s, and how does it look now? It's really changed. I couldn't even believe that this is a building by Beacles, and then Avital showed me this picture, and I understood why, like, yeah, how should it be? But not only Beacles buildings were changed, for example, because during my research I was focused on Beacles, but of course I was trying to find as many buildings by those Polish-born architects as possible. And this is, for example, social housing in Upper Nazareth by Aryeh Sharon, and this is how did it look in the 50s, and on the right now. So I think that actually Polish people and Israeli people had a lot of in common, because I'm really, like, I'm not surprised by this, all those fencing or this hipped roof, like, yeah. So to sum up, I think I've managed to take a look at Israeli architecture. I mean, as a Polish architect from some distance, and to confront my opinions on my views with the reality in Israel. And as I said before, like being awarded with Exercising Modernity Scholarship gave me this courage to change my career and quit my job. So now a month ago I started my PhD studies. So for the next 4 years I will be developing this topic, maybe a little bit changed, but for sure it's not the finish of this journey. And I would really like to thank Avital Efrat for her help and support. And also I would like to thank all the other people who helped me during my study, my research in Israel, in Poland, in Lviv. And also I would like to thank Aleksandra Janus and Małgorzata Jędrzejczyk for the support during the whole academy and then the scholarship. Thank you very much. Maybe I will stop on some nice picture. First one, okay. I don't know how to do it quicker. Okay, do we have questions now or answers? I don't know. I said we because I was traveling with my fiancé and we were together, like he was making all the photographs and like supported me during this trip, because it would be very, very hard to see all those places without a car. It's almost impossible to travel without a car in Israel between all the kibbutzim. So we were traveling together just to support each other, like he supported me. But at the end of the trip, we went to meet one of the other exercising modernity scholar, Yael Wisnicki-Levy. She was there visiting her parents and her grandma, and she took us to the kibbutz of her grandma for a local holiday. So actually this like bond between exercising modernity scholars was quite like strong, and we met like 2 times during our stay in Israel. She was very helpful also because she knew a lot of languages, so for me it was a big help that she could translate me some documents or I could ask her anything. So yeah, I think it's really nice to have the other scholars of exercising modernity.
Because it's kind of, you went really deep. Like, do you want to focus on him? Like, do you want to use this archive from Avital, or you want to really broaden your topic?
He would be one of the main characters of my PhD, but I'm actually not widening the topic by limiting it, because I will focus on this migration of ideas from Europe to Palestine and to Israel. So I will focus on those architects who were educated in Europe. Like I don't want to like study works of architects educated in Technion, but even though it's a very, very big group and very interesting group. But to my PhD, the most important part will be this migration of ideas and comparing what they did design in Europe, or where did they work, and what they designed later in Israel, and to see if it's possible to find any links between those designs, and also to see how did they like change during the years, and how they tried to like put the local climate, landscape, and all the political aspect in their designs. So, yeah, I'm mostly focusing on those who were migrating by adult architects. Mm, I think that we can't tell that they were any group. I mean,
The group,
yeah.
for your research.
Initially, it will be about, I think, 15 people, but they were from different countries in Europe. So I have some, some graduate of Bauhaus, but also graduates of, I don't know, Czerniowce School of Technology. Very, very different places. And I don't know yet, because I have 4 years now to do it, so I don't know yet which I would like to study the most. But I will think that the group that were designing kibbutzim is the most interesting for me. So Bickels, of course, but also Mesteczkin, but also Kaufmann, that was the first generation of kibbutzim planners. And to compare them and see what was the difference between the first generation of kibbutz planners and the second generation. Because, for example, this Nahalal Moshavim, it's from the 20s. It's totally different than what Bickels designed later. It's like formal thing, even like it looks like traditional city or something. Maybe not this one, but I don't have it here, but for example, the design of En Harod by Richard Kaufmann, it's like totally different thing than what Bickels did.
Structurally about the designs of Moshavim and Kibbutzim as far as like the differences?
You mean the differences between Moshavim and Kibbutzim? Yeah, it's quite visible, because maybe I'm wrong, but in Moshavim it was kind of a cooperative, but it was not a commune. So they had their separated grounds, the plots. They had their own houses. Also, children lived with their parents. So the structure of the settlement was totally different. There were no houses for children, no like together like this big farm, but rather smaller. And they were cooperating in this farming, but like, they shared not as many things as in kibbutzim. So yeah, it's a different thing.
Many buildings, and we think that they are looking for them, we want to see them after many, many years. And there is this big disappointment, as I said.
Yeah.
Does they care about them, or do they know that how important it is for other
First thing, I don't think it's such an important element. I mean, for me, this is important because I'm, let's say, architectural historian. But probably for those people, it's not such an important part of the heritage. And also the kibbutzim now are privatized. So probably during all those processes of changes, I don't know, it was in the 90s and at the beginning of 21st century, those buildings, like there were no one to take care about this. And in some kibbutzim, they are very well kept and there is no problem. But I think some of those settlements are a little bit abandoned. It's very varied. Like one of them are super crowded and lively, but the others are a little bit abandoned. So I think that maybe there's like, when I said about Trumpeldor House in Tel Yosef, it was just an initiative of the kibbutz members to adapt the building, to like refresh it, but I'm not a specialist of those processes that took place in kibbutzim, those changes of the beginning of the 21st century. So I actually don't know if there is a structure that could protect those buildings, if not the members.
I think that the reason why some facilities are abandoned is mostly economical, because the structure of the kibbutz has changed, and as Ula said, in most of places they have opportunity to buy their part in this kibbutz, so they still live as a community,
but they mostly share medical care and school and education.
They told us that, for example, these farming fields are rented to the farmers who do it more professional than the kibbutz members. And, for example, we have seen the abandoned hall, like this concert hall, or so it was maybe too expensive to maintain it for this community, because everyone, people were focused on their own household, and it depends on the structure of each kibbutz.
And it's also not so important to keep dining halls so well maintained, because like everyone can cook by their own. Yeah.
The dining halls has changed more to the culture houses.
Or to restaurants, like private restaurants.
Yes, or they have some exhibition spaces in the dining halls, like for like the amateur artist exhibitions, and some like community spaces rather than common dining. So this is observation.
And maybe to add what needs to be done, it's to travel to Lviv and check on the archives on the Lviv University of Technology, because I couldn't manage to do it because the scholarship started in March. I had a researcher there, Zhenya Polyakov, who tried to find some archives and some information about Bikels, maybe his design student's project, but he said that all the archives are closed and protected by the bags with sand, so it's not even possible to enter those places. So I think I need to wait some time to check this last place, because in Lviv there is still a house where Bikels grew up. There's still a place where his father and brother had their medical practices. So I think it's the very interesting part of the story, and I think I would like to go there and see this.
Family stayed in Poland?
Yeah.
You know, what's the story? Like, he migrated himself? Or?
He migrated with his wife, and the rest of the family stayed in Lviv. And I know that his brother moved to a Warsaw ghetto, and he was even in some Catholic family, but he it's maybe a bit funny because he was a psychiatrist. He had some psychiatrist problems, and for example, it was very dangerous to keep him hidden in a house, because he was going to the street and shouting that he's a Jew. And we don't know what happened next, but we can imagine that he and his wife were killed in Treblinka, and parents, I don't know about parents. Maybe I think I found an information that his father was taken to the East War, like the East Front, but I'm not sure if it's true.
I also have one question about like technique, and you because you're coming from Europe, you're coming from Poland, like how did they react on your researching on this topic? Like, do you know, like, if, like, how they perceive, this super interesting topic, like, kind of like, this development of the whole country in a certain period of time, like, are there parallel researchers going on? Like, do you know any scholars from Israel, from Haifa, for example, doing it? Or they were like welcoming you with this, really outsider perspective, on like.
Yeah, I think I was amazed how friendly they were, and they were really like their attitude was very nice, and they were like, "Wow, it's great that you are doing this," and you are so far from here. It's nice. So they were very helpful, very kind, and they usually didn't know anything about Bicals. It was rather like, I'm making a research about Bicals. Who? The one from the Mishkan Museum. Mishkan Museum, I know. And this was the typical conversation. So I think they are not into this topic. I think it was quite well researched by Tzvi Efrat. And later, Bicals was quite well, also researched by Galia Bar-Or during the preparation to the exhibition in Israeli pavilion in Venice. I think it was 2012. It was a big exhibition about kibbutzim, and it was a time when they make a short biography of Bicals, but it was the only one time when somebody written something about Bicals. There was no book, no exhibition, nothing like that. And I asked Avital Efrat if she would like to write a book or something, but she said that she doesn't have time for this because it was only her hobby, to collect all the information about Bicals. So this knowledge is, I think that like there is maybe one person who knows the story also, like except me and Avital, and this is Michael Jakobson. He's an architecture historian, but he looks like at all the like not a particular architect or moment of time or in history, but like the whole architecture of Israel. And his blog, his site, is very useful to get knowledge about the buildings and architects. But he treated as a whole, and his descriptions of the buildings are rather visual, like not the story behind the building, but rather how does it look and how it's maintained today. So Michael Jakobson, yes, but I think not many. And yeah.
But some of this import of ideas from Europe.
Yeah, import of ideas from Europe, it's not so well studied.
Of this journey. It was also the advice of the professor Tzvi Efrat, who is like the icon of
the Zionist architecture studies.
Architecture, and I think it was also his advice to follow this person because the architecture is very interesting, and he knew the state of the research that was already made, and it was good to advise.
Yeah, because at first I would like to compare Sharon and Bicals, like the work for the government of Sharon and the work for like voluntary cooperatives of kibbutzim by Bicals. But Sharon is very well researched. Like he has a huge internet site with his book. Like he wrote his book about himself. So I can't add anything to this history, but Bicals it's still something to see and to find.
I found it in the Einschreiben book. So this the book where they were writing themselves in Bauhaus.
Mm-hmm.
it's really interesting about the identity of Sharon. Because he came back from Palestine,
Yeah.
he's calling himself Palestinian in the book, like because there you have to put nationality.
And this is very
Not,
important.
not Israeli, but Palestinian.
Yeah,
Not-
but
not
this
Jew.
is very interesting thing, because one of this whole identity problem was that when they were migrating to Palestine, like they started a new life. They were changing language, usually changing their names, because Ariel Sharon was born as Ludwig Kurzmann. So it was the new person, and the Polish identity was like cut off. And for me, this is important too, because in Israel, no one is trying to check this, like the earlier personality, the earlier life of this person, because they all grew up in Israel, and they all like grew up in this atmosphere of the white board, so they don't even need to find some information from the previous lives of those architects. And all the information about parents of Bikels, for example, Avital didn't know that. Like she wasn't even interested. She knew that his father was a doctor, and that was all. So this is, I think, something to do.
Else, because probably they are so focused on exactly on the history of Israel.
Yeah.
that actually, they don't even check how complex the topic, like the background is. It's super interesting.
Did you have a particular motivation when you started up with the topic of Polish-born Israeli architect?
The story started 7 years ago. 7 years ago, I've met Bogna Świątkowska, who is chief of Benzmiana Foundation in Warsaw, and she had an idea to write a book about this. Like she only had an idea that she would like to find some architects who were born in Poland and working in Palestine and Israel, and just by I don't know why she asked me to do this. I mean, she was a friend of my friend, and she asked my friend if he knows someone who could write this book. And I was not the only author, but we were a research group of some students of Warsaw University of Technology. We were on the third year of our studies, so we were just we knew nothing about research. And we also had a very short time to do this, only 3 months to write a book. But we finished it. We also made some illustrations because we didn't have rights to any photographs from the period, so we need to draw all the visual, the visual, thing of the book. And they all just forgot, but for me this topic was so important that I decided to develop it and to went to the Academy of Exercising Modernity with this particular topic, because it was somewhere in the back of my head that I shouldn't leave it as it is, because the research was very poor in this book. It was Wikipedia research, and it was not even a scientific publication, but rather a very small booklet about those architects. But I had a base to do all the further research, and I knew which architects I like the most, and I had this kind of intuition in which way should I develop this topic because of this work in 2015.
A lot of drawn graphics, it looks really coherent, really beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
It's really enjoyable visually. Do you already prepare it for the presentation, or
I prepared it for this, for today. The whole thing is prepared for today. It was quite fun to draw all the buildings, but also to get the knowledge about those buildings by drawing them. It's always easier to understand what was the building about after drawing it. Or after, I think this part was the most important, this kibbutz outline, because I think that I will remember this kibbutz outline till the end of my life, because I was drawing it for such a long time. Yeah. Sorry. Oh, thank you.
You went, like, how did you start? Like, I'm curious also, like, from personal perspective, like, how did you said you changed your life with the academy? You know,
Yeah.
you decided
Yeah,
to
because-
skip architecture and go
Yeah.
to research. Did you go with this topic? Did you have contact with professors before? Like, how did you do? Or you just applied for studies?
I really wanted to become a teacher, like always. I think I need to be a teacher. So my dream was to teach at the Warsaw University of Technology, my school, let's say. And I tried in different ways. I mean, some professors wanted to hire me, but there were no free spots for new employees. And I tried to get there like for 3 last years. But it was really hard, and I think that this exercising modernity was the the best moment to do this, because I asked in my work if I would like to have 3 months off for this research and like unpaid vacation, and they said that it's not possible. So I quit the job because I knew that this is like more important for me than sitting in architectural office 10 hours a day. And so actually exercising modernity was the thing that encouraged me to do this step, but I thought about this step for a long time. And and I just got to the PhD studies, like to the doctoral school on the university. It was the easiest way to start with the research work and the teaching, some teaching practice.
Thank you very much. And yeah, please check our webpage and all our social media channels, and we keep you posted. And thanks again for a very insightful and very interesting lecture.